Hi, everybody, as you're joining us. This is looking like a good group. I see a lot of people still being added. We're going to wait just another minute or two while they let everyone in. All right, we already know where the chat feature is. This is going to be great. Looks like there's been a stall in adding. I just want to introduce myself. It's 1:02. Thank you all for being here and being on time. My name is Jen Cates. I'm the Director of Student Engagement for Yuba City Unified School District. And I also get the honor today of introducing our workshop, our trauma and trauma-informed care workshop. Today's virtual workshop is made available with funding from the California Department of Healthcare Services and the California Surgeon General's Office, with funds as an ACEs Aware grantee. Pretty exciting stuff that Sutter County Children and Families Commission has put together for us. Bringing our entire community together today is focused on our education sector. So you're probably going to recognize a lot of names. We're kind of all over Sutter County. So we are the third group that's getting this trauma-informed education from Becky, and we're super honored to have her as our presenter. Our goal today, our agenda, our objective for today is to provide you with an overview on trauma, trauma-informed care, to enhance your understanding of your role in education and what that role that it plays in the lives of individuals, families, and our community in general. Becky is going to be taking over this presentation, and Becky Haas is an international advocate and a facilitator who uses a trauma-informed approach and uses the ACEs study to drive her training. She's also certified by SAMHSA Gains Center. Super, super honored to have Becky here. A very well-known, very engaging presenter. I've been through her workshop before. And as much as I think I know about trauma and trauma-informed, I always learn something new. So I'm very honored to have her here. Few little housekeeping rules. You'll be on mute the whole time just so that the noise kickback isn't an issue, the feedback. It's great if you can have your camera on, because I know as a presenter myself, it's always nice to be able to see people. But we also understand that your phone may ring, something may interrupt, and you may need to have your camera off, and we're respectful of that as well. Today's topic is about trauma. It could potentially trigger some personal feelings, some personal trauma in your own life. Once you learn about the ACEs study, you'll realize most of us probably would score somewhere on the ACEs. And so please feel free to give yourself a break, be kind to yourself, show grace, step away, go to the restroom, get a drink of water, do some grounding exercises or breathing. But whatever it is that may trigger you, just be aware that that's a natural and normal response when you're learning about difficult topics like this. This workshop will be recorded, and I think you saw that as you entered, that it would be recorded, and it'll be available on sutterkids.org in the ACEs Aware Community tab. And I think that Michelle Blake will probably be sending that out to us as well, so that you can make sure that if you missed something, or if you have a colleague that wanted to be here but was unable to be here, we can make sure that we share that with them. All right, I don't think we have any other, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Please make sure that you're using the chat feature. That's that bottom button in the middle there, a little chat bubble. If you have a question, pop that into the chat. There will be opportunities. I'll kind of help guide Becky looking back at that if we miss something, or we want to circle back to something, or we need clarification. But definitely please use that, and there will be an opportunity for some Q&A at the end. Okay, Becky Haas. Are you ready, ma'am?
I am ready.
All right. Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Jennifer, for all your kind words and excitement. Thank you, Michelle and Sutter County Health Department for making this today event possible. So I am way across the nation in Tennessee. So pardon me if I say a few y'alls or anything like that, but it's a joy and an honor to share with teachers today. So just a little, just quickie about me. I learned about trauma-informed care while I was working for the police, reducing drug-related and violent crime. And lo and behold, the work that I helped pioneer here in Northeast Tennessee was recognized by SAMHSA in 2018 as a model other communities should follow. And I was quickly recruited to a very large healthcare system, 22 hospitals in 3 states as their first trauma-informed administrator. And I was pretty much given very few boundaries in what my assignment was there, but to raise awareness that trauma-informed, that ACEs, adverse childhood experiences and childhood adversity, is a social determinant for poor health in rural Appalachia, where we are. And I reasoned what would improve health over time, but to create trauma-sensitive schools. You as educators play such an important role in the lives of students, and I know you know that. And so I put a big map up in my office and I pinned 50 school districts that are in the ballot footprint. And in the 18 months that I worked there, I was able to train 8 of them, 7 of them, or four of them superintendent level down. And now as a consultant, I have many schools that I'm working with. So it's really a joy to be with Yuba City and anybody from Sutter County today. So it's a pretty full 3 hours. We're going to go about an hour and a half and take a quick break. And as Jennifer said, if any of the conversation, the videos kind of hit home, then please step away, take a break, get a drink of water, do some stretches, because the overarching rule of trauma-informed care is do no harm. So again, thank you for joining. So our first section today, we're going to talk about why you as educators need to know about trauma. And some of my training today, I'm hopeful will also help charge your batteries. You know, when I was working in healthcare, as COVID really began to shut things down, I was asked by the corporate media or the corporate marketing of the healthcare system to go out into the community and help to do some events that help to encourage our healthcare heroes. But you know what? In my book, I'll tell you who's really some heroes during this pandemic are teachers and the work that you do. You didn't have 3 months and all to figure out how to put things online, and not just put it online, but to do it well. And teachers are among the bravest, kindest individuals. And so my hopes are some of the things we're going to talk about in the training, particularly about teacher self-care, will even help you to keep yourself resilient during these times. Okay. All right. So this section, we're going to see why you need to know about trauma. What is trauma? How to identify trauma. Trauma is kind of like the wind. You never see the wind, you see the effects of the wind. And then we're going to talk about universal prevalence of trauma, and then understanding the adverse childhood experiences study and building resilience. And that's what we'll cover in this module. And every training that I've ever delivered, I trained police, I was in Delaware a few weeks ago working with the Department of Education in Delaware. They've been creating trauma-sensitive schools for a while, and I was training the police there because many schools have police on site. And so every training that I give, I like to give some foundation, but probably over half of this training today, we're going to give you strategies, okay? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So let's talk about the basics, all right? So why should you, as an educator, learn about trauma? Well, according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, 1 of every 4 children attending school has been exposed to a type of traumatic event that can impact their behavior. So these types of things that it can impact are lower grade point, increase of absences, chances for dropout, higher incidence of suspension and expulsion, and decreases a student's ability to read. So when schools understand the educational impacts of trauma with a gradual shift, much of the things we're going to talk about today really have no cost involved, some training up front here. And then I encourage schools that want to begin to move from training to shifting the culture to form an implementation committee. And I'm going to show you a couple of videos of schools that have done that. And you begin to move forward in shifting the culture. And I like to say that this training is like handing you a pair of glasses, that I'm handing you the trauma-informed lens that you can look at the students that you serve and you teach and the families that go along with them, your teammates, through a trauma-informed lens. And it's not a checklist, but it really becomes a way of being. So think about today's workshop. Like if we were in a workshop on compassion or respect, you wouldn't go home and say, well, I was in a workshop on respect. I showed respect one time today. No, it becomes really part of the way we approach things, okay? And then trauma sensitivity will look different at each school. So we may have on the workshop today, kindergarten, we may have elementary, we may have high school, middle school, city schools, county schools. And that's the beauty of this, is that you really get to be the ones that drive the application, okay? So as an educator, you don't really need a peer edited, research article to come in and validate what your gut already tells you as a teacher. A student's life outside of school matters. And through the training today, I'll give you some resources that if you want to do some additional reading, or several of the groups that I work with, they do start doing book studies with the implementation crew. And here's a great book that many of the schools I work with use. It's called Fostering Resilient Learners from Kristen Sowers, and she and a seasoned educator put this together, and it's real practical. But you don't need somebody really to tell you a kid's life matters, what's going on outside of school. And we don't, in trauma-informed care, we really don't need to know. The goal is not about knowing the story of the trauma, but about understanding the effect of that trauma on the child. So I like to use this quote, that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then we have a tendency to treat every problem as a nail. So today's training, I'm not trying to tell you how to be a teacher. I'm sure if I had the opportunity to get to know you, there are amazing teachers in this workshop today. My goal is to give you some new tools as a teacher that can help you deal with the lingering effects of trauma that your students have going on in their life. So what is trauma? Well, according to SAMHSA, the 3 E's define trauma. And this is that an individual trauma results from an event, a series of events, a set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual, that it can be physically or emotionally harmful. And that these events can have a lasting adverse effect on the child in their life. And so we want to take a look at those E's one at a time. Kind of break it down. That's a mouthful. So the first E is potential traumatic events. And if we had more time today, if we were in person, like all good workshops, we'd have markers and Post-it notes, and we'd go around the room and we'd ask you for your input on what could be potentially traumatic. But for the sake of time and virtual training, we have listed here abuse, things that could be abuse that people have suffered, chronic stressors, poverty, racism, children that are living in homes with caregivers with substance abuse disorder, caregivers with mental illness. Now during COVID, many of our families, many of the families in our school, many of the families of the children we teach have been navigating COVID, and some of it has been very, very difficult. And family and friends have lost loved ones. So that's added to the community and the trauma that could be experienced by a community. And then there's loss, the death of a family member, or abandonment, neglect. The Center for Disease Control says the number one form of child abuse is child neglect. Or there are natural disasters. A few years ago in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, not very far from, about an hour and a half from where I live, we had the Gatlinburg fires. I know in California, often. You all are navigating fires that really capture the attention of the nation, and things that you all have endured in the California area. And, many times then rebuild with resilience. But these are all potential traumatic events. Okay. Now, the reason we say potential is because you and I can experience the same event. And while it's traumatic to me, it's not traumatic to you. And when we get in a little bit deeper and we talk about the ACEs study, what we're going to see is that the ACEs study learned that when we have nurturing support, that helps us to navigate hard places in life. And so sometimes that's why these events could happen to both of us, and one of us go down a wrong path afterwards, or get stuck there, but somebody else in time navigates it because they have a support system. So these are the potential traumatic events. The second E of the definition is the experience. And this can be impacted by how did it happen, when, where, and how often. So it's your individual experience, not necessarily the event, again, itself, that's traumatizing. So when I was working for police, and I began training, creating all these types of trainings to train my community to become practitioners in using trauma-informed care. I had some conversations with some of the detectives that did the child homicide crimes, and they told me that in that particular year they'd investigated, our community is about 70,000 people, and they told me that in that year they had investigated 20 homicides on children that had died 2 years old and under. And they said that of 18 of those homicides, they were the 18 of the 20 were all that a child died at the hands of a known caregiver. And whether it was abuse or that oftentimes the caregiver, in one case, a mother went off to work, left a toddler with a boyfriend, and the boyfriend went out to do around drug activity and just left the child in a crib with some food, and they came home hours later and the child had choked. And so many times the infliction of events by known caregivers, that impacts the experience of the trauma. And then it comes to the effects. So the effect of trauma on an individual can become conceptualized as a normal response to an abnormal situation. So sometimes we deal with the problem, we're presented with the problem behavior of someone, which to them is the answer to navigating the very traumatic situation. Again, working for police, I was tasked with reducing recidivism, which is the rate every state has when people are incarcerated and they're out of jail. Within 1 to 3 years, how many people go back? And Tennessee's rate is about 50%. And so when I was overseeing this program, working with felony offenders with addictions, I heard stories I'll never forget of people talking about in the justice system. One lady being raised by a mother, a heroin addict, and she said her youngest memory as a child was when her mother would shoot up with heroin. She would be pulling her mother out of the toilet because her mother would get very sick, all while her older sisters hollering across the house, "Let her drown, let her drown." And educators, I'm saying to this woman that day, I'm so sorry that is your story. That is the beginning of your life. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about trauma-informed care is because educators, we don't pick where we start in life. I could be you and you could be me. And I know you realize that many of the families that you serve as an educator are coming from a hard place, many of the children. And so the day that I said that to her, the next time I saw her, she gave me a little note and said, "Thank you, Miss Becky, for treating me like a person." And so while I was encouraging her to take advantage of counseling and her treatment plan, I just expressed some empathy because to me, what now she had gotten into the justice system through drug addiction, to her, that was the way to navigate this situation. So the effects of trauma is this kind of starts to be the way that people view life as dangerous, as threatening because of traumatic things that have occurred. And so 3 summers ago, I was training 200 regional school nurses up here in Northeast Tennessee, and When I got to this slide, they're all shaking their head up and down because physical trauma has physical and emotional displays. And when we want to think about what does trauma look like? Well, headaches, tummy aches, poor control of emotions, inconsistent academic behavior, unpredictable or impulsive behavior, overreacting or underreacting to sounds and smells and certain things that happen, intense reactions to violating a personal space, being corrected, fighting when being criticized or teased. And you know, those nurses, when I was training them, every year nurses know they're going to have the frequent flyer in their school of the kids with the headaches and the tummy aches. And yes, it may be a headache, maybe it is a tummy ache, but very, very likely it could be in response to a child having hard places to navigate outside of school. So when I began to learn about this topic, I think what really got a lot of national attention as the ACEs study was conducted in the late 90s was how much trauma exists in our community. And as Jennifer said in the introduction, and as I alluded to, you know, many of us on this training today are trauma survivors as well. But let's talk for a minute about the universal prevalence of trauma. So 1 of every 4 children attending school has been exposed to a traumatic event that can affect learning or behavior. In 2017, suicide was the second leading cause of death among children ages 10 to 17. I had earlier in 2020 a group of students from a university in Lithuania reach out to me because if you Google what country leads the world in death by suicide, it's Lithuania. In 2013, 1 of every 3 people in Lithuania died by suicide. And a lot of it is because of systemic and generational violence. Until a few years ago, domestic violence wasn't even a reportable crime in Lithuania, and the most dangerous place for a woman is her own home. And so we began to do some training and work with, because we know that when suicide is high in the United States, and we begin to look at a child's adverse childhood experiences growing up, one of the greatest travesties is it robs young people of hope and inspiration that there could be a future. And so we see high numbers represented from the CDC in our nation. 3.5 to 10 million children every year witness violence against their mother. And the reason there's a broad gap there, statistics tell us it takes 7 acts of violence before someone will reach out for a shelter, a family justice center. So while police may be responding to these calls, there's a lot of unreported violence. And sadly, I work on the National Trauma Campaign, working to advocate and advance this message across the nation. And it's of grave concern, the number of increased home violence due to the isolation and separation around COVID-19. And then 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys sexually abused before adulthood. And then look at this, educators. In a study of juvenile justice setting, 94% of children in the juvenile justice system have experienced trauma. So we see by this that it's pretty certain that about 70% of the students that we serve, the families we serve, even among our coworkers, that individuals are trauma survivors. All right, we're going to watch a very quick little video, about 5 minutes, that does an excellent job explaining the ACEs study.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
All right, so let's discuss that a minute. So the ACEs study was done by two doctors in the late 90s, Dr. Folletti from Kaiser Permanente in California, and Dr. Robert Anda from the Center for Disease Controls. They were actually doing this independently and learned about each other's work. So they came together and created the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And California, Tennessee, since 2016 has been working to become a trauma-informed state. But we all, many of the other states, we certainly keep our eye on California and the great work of your Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who is a real leader around the world in this advancing this topic. But what was learned from the ACEs study, the 10 questions were scrolling there in the movie on the screen, the little video. 5 things did you see this in your home before age 18, and 5 things did this happen to you? And what they learned in that was something they never really expected to uncover, was how significant childhood adversity was as far as a determinant for future life and health disparities unless a child had healthy support. And so as this graphic shows, when the beginning of life is filled with adversity or toxic stress, it's going to bring about some altered brain connections, and we're going to do a deeper dive in that in a minute. And that's going to lead to poor social connections, poor learning, because the part of the brain that's ready to come to school for you to do your great work as a teacher is not as developed. And then that's going to cause individuals to use risky behaviors to cope. When bad things happen to all of us, we need to have coping mechanisms. And when kids and young people don't have healthy support at home or around them, then many times they're going to be involved with teenage pregnancy, early age tobacco, early introduction to alcohol, cutting, self-harm, eating disorders, and drug addiction. And so that's why many communities, I'm working with several cities across the nation, Augusta, Georgia, and Middle Tennessee, and several different ones, as far as looking at this as a social determinant for improving health. So that's what the ACEs study helped us to see. And then we saw in the ACEs study that ACEs can have a lasting adverse effect on health, obesity, diabetes, suicide rate, cancer, stroke, and behaviors that when people are not using healthy coping mechanisms, they're going to use unhealthy coping mechanisms like smoking and alcohol use. And then the life potential, graduation rates, academic achievement, and lost time from work, all of these put into effect really a domino effect for individuals. And then this great graphic comes from Dr. Wendy Ellis and some of her colleagues at the George Washington School of Public Health, and they call it a pair of ACEs. I'm a bit of a city girl. My husband of 37 years grew up on a farm in Iowa, and now his family's in Arkansas, and they raise chickens and geese, and I never really knew how it got to Kroger under shrink wrap, but he grew up on the other side in the farming. And so ever since we've been married, he'll put out tomatoes, or he loves to grow blackberries, mostly because he loves to eat blackberry cobbler. But he knows a little bit more about when we don't have a good soil condition, then it's not going to have, it's going to impact whatever is being grown. And so if you'll notice there in the soil, poverty, discrimination, lack of opportunities, when this is the condition of the soil, notice what is going to be growing on the fruit: domestic violence, homelessness, incarceration. And so we as communities need to come and address these different types of environments and conditions. And many communities across the nation and now around the world are focused on becoming more resilient, because now we know what the ACEs study showed us. Even though ACEs may be fact, the good news is we've learned that they don't have to be fate. So healing begins, and the trauma can be overcome by building resilience and the caring support of others. So later research that was released in 2019, Dr. Christina Bethel and her team at Johns Hopkins, they showed that positive childhood experiences actually buffer against the health effects of the adverse ones. And we're going to be talking more about that here shortly. All right, let's watch this little video from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child of how resilience is built.
Resilience is not some magical quality. It's something that really can be built, even in difficult circumstances.
The key active core ingredient to building resilience are the relationships kids have to others who care about them.
Of course, families play a very important role, but nobody raises children in isolation. We have a huge amount of research to show the powerful impacts of teachers, coaches, other adults in the community with whom children have a chance to develop relationships, who play that critical supportive role of building resilience. As a result of responsive interaction, children build simple skills of coping and adapting. How to stop crying, how to regulate your behavior, being able to defer gratification.
You have an adaptive toolkit that allows you at moments of stress or challenge to bring out a number of potential skills that allow you to get through
it. As children get older, the sophistication of those skills increases. Being able to monitor situations, solve problems. The way we as a society can nurture the development of resilience is to help communities to pay more attention to building the capabilities of the adults who care for children and provide the supports they need to tip the scales toward more positive life outcomes.
And then when communities say, we want to be an active part of crafting the solution, to really understand what's necessary to produce the resilience, that's when the ball gets rolling.
Resilience building, capacity building, is really in everyone's interest, and everyone reaps the benefits when we do that well.
All right, so in that film, it showed that resilience, like a skill, is something that we need to be aware is critical for children to develop. Because again, when traumatic things are happening and we don't pick where we start in life, kids should be having the support of family members. But as you know, as educators and school staff, many times that's the source of the dysfunction. In my working now with schools for many years, I've heard stories of young people, 15, locking themselves in a closet at night because their mother's a heroin addict. And when the mother's passed out, people in the room around the home, around the drug activity, come in the room of the young person or violating them. And so this young person, a teacher told me, began to sleep in their closet. But the problem was the closet didn't have a lock on it. And so this young person put their feet up against the door. So at least when someone came in the room that was going to bring harm to them, at least they were going to be jarred awake by the closet door opening. And educators, you have to ask yourself that when that is what the situation the young people are growing up in, and they come to school, it just shows, it emphasizes how much more the healthy support and the healthy relationships that there are at school can make and what a lifeline they are and what a difference they can make in the lives of those students. And so the Center for Disease Control's around the resilience idea, they've crafted terminology called protective factors. And so we want to think about what are these protective factors. Think about COVID-19. All of us know about hand washing. I have two little grandchildren, 5 and 3, and a new one on the way here just in a few weeks. We're so excited. But our little grandchildren, to think about my little 3-year-old grandson that almost half, if not most of his life, he's known life wearing a mask. We all went Sunday to one of our local zoos together, and in certain areas we were all masked up. But what are the masks? And then there was hand sanitizer everywhere, which probably is a good idea for zoos, and maybe it'll be even something we continue. But look at all the things that have been put in place to try to keep us safe from COVID-19 with the masks and social distancing and hand washing. Well, for protective factors for families and individuals, we need to think about, do we have concrete support in time of need? Now, everybody in the training today, you may have a pretty good network of friends, but who are the few friends that you may text in the middle of the night if you had a family emergency or needed some kind of support? That's what we want to define by concrete support, or that we can build social connections and that people have parenting skills, personal resilience, and then the ability to help children develop social emotional competence and the ability to foster nurturing attachment. And then as far as community can build protective factors. And this is a short little video from the Center for Disease Controls on what some of those factors are. So as we watch this little video, I want you to go in the chat, and if you hear Marcus tell about anything in this story that helps support him or his family.
This is my neighborhood. I grew up in this.
If you hear anything they're talking about that he said helped support him as a young person and his family, and now things he sees in his community, go in the chat and put those in, okay? We want you to help identify what are these community protective factors.
This building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class about handling challenges of single parenting. The clinic offers free childcare so Mariana's daughter, Ella, can play while Mariana's in class. The class helps parents like Mariana develop positive parenting skills, not just for babies and toddlers, but for teenagers too. This is another way our community has come together to give families the resources they need, and just one more way to prevent ACEs. This was my school, Riverside Middle, right in the heart of town. These kids are here for a sponsored summer camp. This community-supported program helps families with affordable, quality childcare and helps kids get tutoring and learn life skills. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at this school all year long. There was one counselor, Miss Greer, who I remember more than anyone. She was a really good listener. Miss Greer helped me and my brother get involved in after-school activities like baseball and soccer. Our coaches were super nice and were mentors to us. Staying after school for practice kept us and a lot of other kids out of trouble. When schools help take responsibility for preventing ACEs, everybody wins. My life could have gone in a completely different direction. Studies show that ACEs can have long-term negative effects on kids' health and well-being that may last into adulthood and even continue in future generations. But by people and groups taking action, ACEs can be prevented. In fact, there are 5 known strategies that help stop ACEs before they even start. You can implement them in your own community, just like we did. How? By strengthening economic support for families, by changing social norms to support parents in positive parenting, by providing quality care and education early in life, by enhancing parenting skills to promote healthy child development, and by intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. So, now you know my story, and you've seen the prevention strategies in my community that helped me beat the odds. I had healthy relationships with my family and friends. I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
All right, let's see if anybody went in the chat here. What do we got for the film talking about? Yeah, Mr. Martino's shop. Yep. Mentors, career workshops to help other families, after school activities, clinic that offers free childcare, parenting. Boom, you all have it. Employment opportunities, mentoring, banana split dates. I want to go on one. Yes, very good, very good. Okay, so you may be thinking, I'm a teacher. Now I have to arrange career workshops. Well, no, but maybe as your school is on their journey to become trauma informed, many schools have programs like Community in Schools partnerships, which has a social worker in the school. Some have family resource centers. And so some of these activities, or maybe some of your school admin staff, your volunteers, can help the community and bring information to the school that you communicate to parents about upcoming job fairs or upcoming training centers. When I worked for the police, I partnered with Goodwill Industries, and they started a customer service training, and many of the people that graduated from that 40-hour customer service program, they would go from running a cash register at fast food to bump up to more livable wages to become a trainer. And so I put this in a teacher training because just to show you that as far as our families and the better opportunities for the children to flourish, that we need to think about some of the things. And to quote your Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she said when she was a pediatrician in San Francisco and she learned about ACEs, she said, if I likened it or compared it to lead poisoning, and she said I could either be a pediatrician that helped children know about lead poisoning and families to deal with the symptoms of it, or I could go to the house and find the source of the lead. And so when we think about the conversation with protective factors, that's exactly what we're doing. We realize that when the families are going home into these disparities, then how can we help connect them or give them information about things that are going to improve their quality of life? Okay, so from that little video, we see some of the community protective factors: safe neighborhoods, safe schools, stable and safe housing, access to nutritious food, employment, medical care. One of the schools that I worked with, an alternative school, they realized, a high school, they realized the kids, no one's taking them to the doctor, and they were able to partner with a local medical community, some providers that would come a couple of days a week. And in the winter, when kids were going through, strep throat and things like that, they just brought the medical into the school. And because the kids didn't have caregivers that were taking them to access it. And then I don't know about your community, but sometimes here, transportation. if you work a night job or on Sunday, our bus system doesn't run. And so sometimes that's a huge barrier. And then also safe, high quality, affordable childcare, and then inclusion and equity to all races, that services are available to all races, ethnicities, and those with disabilities. All right, now here's your homework, okay? I know you're going to pull your hair out, homework, but I'm trying to make this a little light today. My sons are grown and married. They're like, Mom, please don't try to be funny. You're not. But I'm going to show you 2 videos. And before we start them, they're both true stories, okay? And I've watched these videos many times and often at the beginning cried during them. They're very touching stories. And the first one is Chad. And I want you to watch as Chad navigates hard places in life, and go into the chat and tell who is Chad's support system, okay? And then as soon as we finish watching Chad, we're going to jump right to the next little video, and it's Josh's true story. And Josh navigates some hard places in life as well. And I want you to go in the chat and tell who is Josh's support system, okay? All right, here we go with Chad.
It's just hard with that. I mean, I was just a kid. I mean, 'cause here everybody knew our business, knew what was happening to us, and it was brutal. Oh my God, there's a school. If you go right up here, there's a turn, and you can situate it.
It's a tough thing back here.
Yeah. This is crazy. There were some good times though, like we'd have a good 30 minutes or so before we heard the sliding glass door open. And one day he came in and he actually had pizza, like supreme pizza. And another day, everything, it was fine. And another day he came in, for no reason, he just smashed my mom's head against that cabinet there. Just thinking of, just to the left of where they're playing, it's where my brother and I would play. My dad, he would come home and we had to be really good at sports and stuff, so. There's one time where we're sitting, I knew it was coming. I knew my brother, Bobby, I knew that he would be the one to bear the brunt of it. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Chad reminds me of a lot of the kids that have come through here. Angry, very angry. And you could tell he just didn't want to connect with anybody. And you could tell he was hiding something. He always came in with a nervous stomach. My stomach hurts, my stomach hurts. And he finally came clean and told me his father had major anger issues. He said, you know, I need to talk to somebody. And I instantly thought of Coach Morrow.
Chad wasn't a football player per se. He was just a kid that had energy that needed to do something. He needed to be a part of something because I don't think he had anyone as a role model or someone showing him what to do.
Coach Morrow was the only person I really trusted in this town. He was always there.
Yeah. There was times I would give him a ride home. We would talk, sometimes we wouldn't talk. But it was interesting to have a discussion with someone, a young man who had no one to talk to.
He was the only one there for my graduation. Even my family wasn't there.
You're doing good. You're okay.
I just remember when you were walking across, I just remember looking up. He had this big old...
Sorry about that. My husband's
Just ear to ear.
mowing.
Grin.
It takes a village to raise a child. And it doesn't matter what nationality, what race, we're all from the human race. If you interact with someone, it shows them that you care.
Good memories, you know? Yeah. You gotta hold on to those.
It's love thy neighbor. It's what we should do.
When was the last time you saw him?
About 8 years ago. And actually, right over here is Lucille's barbecue. The best barbecue you'll ever have in your life. And Coach Morrow actually took me there, like after high school graduation. But take this right. It's gonna be your first right over there. Just pull in, not this one, but. I freaking knew it. I freaking knew it. I did too. I knew something was up.
No,
I knew something with that. I knew it. I knew you all were doing something.
No, you did. There he is.
Yeah. I heard you were in town. I knew you couldn't pass up some Lucille's, man. Oh, good to see you. I'm so proud of you. You've done well. You've done well.
All right, let's see what you got in the chat here. One person can have a big family. Coach Morrow. Yep. Coach Morrow. Yes, very good, very good. And there was a lady in the white outfit, and I'm guessing she was a teacher or maybe a school counselor. So we have two people here as a support, and you can see how genuinely Chad loves Coach Morrow to see him there at the end in that surprise. But I think you would easily agree that Chad is in a very hard place with a father that is just, very, very violent. So, all right, let's watch. Good job. Everybody gets an A in my class. Let's watch Josh's story. And then go to the chat and tell who's Josh's support system in our case study number 2. I apologize. My husband is mowing, and if you hear any of that in the background. It's funny when you didn't do things virtually, you would talk about noises that are going on in the office, but now it's things like outside noise or the washing machine. There we go.
From what I understand, his father passed away, and he would have pictures of him in his locker. Some students thought it would be a good idea to rip down those pictures and harass him and bully him for missing and loving his father.
Going through what I went through, you kind of keep to yourself. You don't know who you are or anything. You're just walking through the space, empty space. It's kind of like a puzzle. You're trying to find your way to the good things in life.
No one wants to be bullied. Everyone wants to feel like they mean something to somebody.
It's definitely a hard 4 years of your life,
Even like a few words can affect someone so negatively.
I'd sit in the cafeteria alone. I wouldn't talk to anyone. Even if people invited me to sit with them, I didn't feel this was my place to be, you know.
Coming to a city school, a lot of people said, you're just going to make it worse. I didn't know what else to do for them. So yeah, we just took the jump. I was pretty scared, you know. I kind of thought the city experience, maybe a bigger high school rather than a small town high school, it just might be better.
I hope that attending the school, I would be treated like everyone else. Yeah, I just wanted to make it and just be a normal kid. I was sick and tired of being a no one. I wanted to be someone and wanted to reach out to people and show who I was.
I just remember at first they called him the doorman. They thought he was weird.
It was definitely kind of weird. It took a while for people to adjust. But once people realized that he was continuing with it, it almost became something to look forward to in the morning. Like, you walk up the stairs and you know that Josh Yant's gonna be standing there with a big smile on his face saying good morning.
No problem.
The first few weeks when I started doing it, they were kind of shocked.
Good, you? Thank you.
Not many people hold doors, right? But after that, people started to open up to me. Opening a door is more than a physical act. It's about putting yourself out there, getting to know people, making them feel comfortable, making them feel welcome.
Thank you. No problem.
Opening doors, it gives people hope that people care.
I think that was his way of saying I'm here and I'm not going to be invisible anymore.
He had literally, just by holding doors and saying good morning, he had made a drastic change in his life.
It was definitely a positive effect. Like, it made people want to do nice things for other people. Like, he set a good example for other students.
Everything changed huge. I mean, everyone said it. All the teachers, the students felt it. They talked about it, you know, that he changed things in the school. And he was a changed Josh.
We were honored to have Josh, or privileged. Any school would have benefited.
I think Prom King was a way to say thank you from the students and the staff. So when he won, it was like his moment to shine.
When we heard Josh Yant's name pulled out, it was like pretty much everyone should have just ran up there and been Prom King because it felt like everybody won.
Yeah, he's standing tall and straight. He's got the big grin on his face and got the crown.
I never expected to get an award or anything like that. I was just happy enough to make it through.
Just 1 year and things are totally turned around, totally. And it would have been fine if the story stopped there. It could have, and it would have been okay. And he still would have been the same person.
All right, guys, so now is the moment. Let's all line up at the side of the room. Once we're all lined up quietly, we will head down to the gym.
I would have never thought he would be a public speaker because he had been so shy, but he took to public speaking like a duck to water.
He draws them in, and it's this aura, it's this personality that he exudes. He's been there, and so they relate to him in that respect.
When I'd heard your story, it kind of made me feel like I could be more like myself. It changed the way I thought about things. It changed the way, how I felt about myself.
I personally think that you shouldn't let, what's going on around you affect your personality or the way you act.
I think he shows them just be courageous. You know, don't let the bullies get you down. Just, you know, fight back in your own way, maybe with a little kindness.
It's amazing how just one simple act can change your whole life. I never thought doing something so simple could be so rewarding.
All right, what a powerful story. All right, who was Josh's support system? Anybody in the chat there? Who was Josh's support when he lost his father and, at the high school there? Can you imagine having pictures on the locker and kids tearing up the pictures? But, we see often bullying, but who was Josh's support system in navigating that? Took a jump, moved to a new town, started in a new school. Anybody in the chat? Give it a go. Who was Josh's support system? Chad, it was the school. Chad, it was the coach, his classmates, his peers. What about his mom too? Yep, there you go, his mom. And so, some situations it should be family members, but when in Chad's case, the family members were the source of the trauma. Very good, very good. All right, so you see there how important that the support systems are in both these young men, true stories, navigating very hard places. So we want to think about what are in Tennessee, the Building Strong Brains network of the ACEs work going on in Tennessee use this great metaphor to think about resilience like charging stations, because we all get it. We all have a smartphone or an iPad. When I went to bed last night, my smartphone, the battery is red, but I didn't lose any sleep. I just plugged that thing in, and this morning when I woke up, it's all charged up. And we need to think about our students coming in. Many of them are not charged up. And you know what, teachers, many times our coworkers are not charged up. And we want to talk about self-care here in a bit, but think about ourselves, like our technology, that we have a battery, so to speak, okay? And we need to think about what can we do in our schools? What can we do, with some positive just gestures or celebrations or high fives or just greetings or connections. And what we're going to talk about the rest of the training, those are the kind of things that can become the charging stations to create resilience in our schools, okay? All right, so now we're going to shift gears, and well, we just want to kind of talk about here as we build resilient schools. We want to think about 3 areas. So the goal is where we're starting today is that staff are trained to understand trauma, that we create warm, welcoming environment, that we create a sense of safety, and programs don't re-traumatize students, and we also consider creating a committee for change, as we're going to see here in a couple of videos in a few minutes. And then in the middle level, we want to see how can we support student and family success? Can we have any kind of pipeline in our school, whether it's social work, whether it's guidance counseling, whether it's family resource center, that help our families to access case management, to deal with food scarcities, become aware of housing opportunities, job skill training, mentoring opportunities. And we do all this in a non-judgmental, non-shaming, non-blaming fashion. And then we also, obviously, when kids and families have experienced trauma, we want to have a clear access to finding behavioral health resources. But see, the good news about trauma-informed care is that healing happens at all 3 layers. Historically, in the past, we've only recognized that people needed behavioral health, which is important. But now, through trauma-informed care, through becoming resilient focused organizations and communities, now we know that healing can happen at all levels. And if you'll notice in my pyramid there, many people think that 60 to 70% of trauma in the individual's lives, kids' lives, can be mitigated through the kindness of a coach, through the kindness of teachers. Bruce Perry, who's a very important voice in this conversation, Dr. Perry says, I heard him in a podcast recently talking about how that more healing has happened for people who's experienced trauma in a coaching setting or with a locker room, being involved in a group around a sport than in an actual counseling center. So we can't underestimate the healing for trauma survivors that we can create in our environments. And another story I want to give just that illustrates this resiliency on before COVID in 2019, one night watching the CBS nightly news, I saw a story of a bus driver in Nevada And this bus driver was talking about how much she enjoyed her bus route in a rural area there in Nevada. And she was saying that in that school year, as she began, one of the bus stops she picked up, a little girl who was 11, and they just really hit it off. And they just always smiled, greeted each other, shared a little joke. And one of the things that she thought was so cute with this little girl is the little girl always had her hair meticulously braided. And so several months into the school year, one Monday morning, the bus driver pulls up to the bus stop and the little girl's not there. And the little girl's pretty perfect attendance. So, she thought, well, maybe she's ill today. But however, on Tuesday, the bus driver pulled up to the bus stop and the little girl's missing. Wednesday, the little girl's not there. Thursday, Friday, the whole week, the little girl's not on the bus. So on Monday, you can imagine the relief when the bus driver pulled to the bus stop and there's the little girl. So she greeted her with as she got on the bus, and the little girl was looking down and raised her eyes up slowly and gave a smile to the bus driver as she was greeted. But one of the things the bus driver noticed was that the little girl didn't have her hair braided. So on Tuesday, the little girl was there, but again, no braids. Wednesday, no braids. Thursday, no braids. So finally, the bus driver, as they're dropping the kids off at school, said to the little girl, "I sure miss your braids." And the little girl looked up at her very slowly and she said, "Last week, my mommy died and my daddy doesn't know how to braid hair." And folks, a bus driver dropped the kids off, went to Walmart, got a clean hairbrush and a bag of bows, and told the little girl when she got back on the bus that afternoon, in the morning, when you come in, you stay on the bus just a minute and I'll brush your hair and I'll braid it. And that was so significant to that little girl rejoining life, so to speak, that it caught the attention of the teacher, who said something to the principal, who said something later to the superintendent, and it made their local news and ended up on the national news. And so that is the work of becoming a trauma-informed school, a trauma-informed, resilient, focused community, is that healing can happen in some of the smallest everyday gestures. And I just think that it's so exciting sometimes, and you may underestimate how much you do as a teacher that is making a difference in the lives of your students. And you want to realize too that when you partner with children, that you're partnering with their families. Ed data shows that partners, when parents partner with educators, it's better for all, better outcomes, and the partnerships to thrive. We need to understand that we're all doing our best in this. And we need to know that when we teach traumatized children, they often have traumatized caregivers, and that we may need to repeat information frequently to caregivers that are growing up and or raising a family in these hard places. And then, do we have any mechanisms in place in our school that can be referrals to our families who are in need of groceries or financial assistance? And then we want to think, as I mentioned earlier, about schools at time, either hosting job fairs, health or dental fairs. We have a thing here called RAM, Remote Area Medical. And they'll go out, medical people, doctors, optometrists, dentists will volunteer on a weekend and go out to the fairground and provide some of these services. And just knowing about some of those things can help be better partnerships with families. And then above all is that we always want to provide this assistance in a non-shaming, non-blaming lens. All right, let's talk for just a few minutes before our break about how trauma affects brain development and can impact school performance, and then talk a little bit about addressing trauma during COVID-19. All right, this little video is a quick little cartoon about how brains are built and how toxic stress can derail brain development.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
All right, let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, so in the video there, two of the main themes it talked about. One was called serve and return. And the little graphics, it illustrated it like a tennis match, a baby cooing and the parent returning the cooing or the noise. And what the video said, shared there, is that serve and return it's not an elective. It is an essential function that a child have, serve and return with a caregiver when they're in those early developmental years between 0 and 6, the time that the brain is the most got the most plasticity and those neural pathways are being developed, that the child's upper part of the brain, the cortex being developed, has to have serve and return. That's why I'm working with childcare professionals all across the state of Tennessee. I've trained childcare professionals in Mississippi because when our children are not getting the serve and return at home, then we can help caregivers in childcare and Head Start understand how significant this is. And some of this can be recovered in those settings. Even some here locally, the libraries, they started using preschool library time with caregivers and kids coming in the library. And some of the librarians started building serve and return bags and teaching the caregivers how, through simple things like reading a book together or doing a puppet show, this is helping that child's upper part of the brain. And in the video, video, it said that serve and return is like building bricks. And one of the buildings, the video went on to say that the bricks are used to build is air traffic control. So if I could see all your lovely faces today, if we were in person, I would ask you to raise your hand that how many of you ever have kids that when you're just teaching really for no reason, they aren't in control emotionally. They have a meltdown, or they, really just burst into talking or interruption, and really just show. And I know some of that, develops with older child, that kind of thing. But some of the children have really no emotional regulation because they were not getting the serve and return as a young child. And so executive functioning includes working memory, mental flexibility, and self-control. And that's going to show up in your classrooms as school readiness, math and reading competence, and then later job stability, positive relationships, and overall quality of life. And so when I was working for the large healthcare company, they sent me to Nashville, our capital of our state, to talk to the Senate Health Committee. And I was just given a very few minutes. And I thought to myself, what could be the most impressive information I could give to our health committee, our legislated elected officials in Tennessee, to show them why we need to be committed to supporting children that are growing up in toxic stress. And this was one of the slides I used. So you have two different PET scans here, children the same age, 6 years old, but they're two different children. One is labeled a healthy brain, and notice the areas that are circled there. That's the cortex, the part of the brain. And then notice behind the circles how much there is all highlighted in red. So what that shows is a child getting the serve and return. That brain is ready to come to school in kindergarten, ready to come into first grade. That brain has been developed in an environment with healthy support where that part of the brain is developed. But teachers look to the other side there. This is a child that's labeled an abused brain. I would have probably labeled it a neglected brain. This is a child the same age growing up in Romania. And I have a sister, a younger sister, that her and her husband many years ago adopted a little child from China, a 3-year-old. And she just graduated from college, landed a really good job in her field in marketing. And we're so proud of her. But in that kind of situation as here, these children could be as many as 200 children being monitored by about 5 or 6 adults. And so even though they have a roof over their head, food to eat, clothing on their back, in her case, my niece's case, that every night at 7 o'clock, children that were of the age of mobile walking, they were literally tied to their beds by their ankles because that few of staff couldn't control that many young people. And when she came into my sister's lives, she would rock herself to sleep at night. And my children never did that. My grandchildren don't do that. Why? Because they had the nurturing support of caregivers. And teachers, look right here is the science. Look at the areas circled here. This is coming into your classroom, kids sitting side by side, one with a developed brain and one with not. Here's another great way to illustrate it. And I use this slide with the legislative presentation I gave. So a typical brain development develops upside down as a pyramid, where the child's getting a lot of nurturing support, trips to the zoo, books read, numbers repeated, songs in the car, and that child's brain is developing it in the upside down with a little bit of survival. My grandchild, Paisley, who's 5, when she was about 3, I was over at their house one day and she said, "Nammy," she calls me Nammy. She can't say Grammy. She said, "Nammy, could we build a tent?" And I said, "Sure, go in the living room and get a blanket and we'll build a tent." And she said, "Oh, no, Nammy, I can't go in there. There's a wolf in there." And I said, "There's no wolf in your living room." But she was convinced there's a wolf in there. So I held her little hand, went in there, we got a blanket. And of course, there's no wolf. But yeah, a few nights later, we were over there and our son said, "Hey, Mom, look at this." He said, "Alexa, make a wolf." Well, if you got Alexa, ask her to make a wolf. She's pretty doggone convincing. I said, "Son, you better dial it back because your daughter thinks there's a wolf in your house." And so what happened was she had a little bit of terror there, a little bit of scary, but now she's got Alexa all figured out, and she's taking dance lessons, and she'll say, Alexa, jazz music. And, so now she knows that that wolf sound was just coming from a little technology box. But what happened was she had that emotional support around her. Okay. But when we have kids that are growing up, locking themselves in a closet, I could have coffee every single week of the month with somebody that I know or who meets me through social media or some of the talks that I give, trainings that I give, that is adopted foster care. And many of the foster care are just now starting to put this in some of the training because we have children that are, recently I was talking to a foster mom who has a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old siblings, and the 12-year-old started to run away. And when they were in a counseling, the counselor said to the little boy talking about running away, and he said, draw a picture of some things about your childhood. And this 12-year-old drew a picture, perfect perspective of being on a bottom bunk bed at about 5 years old, holding on to a tiny little child, which was his brother, watching his father push a dresser over on his mother. Teachers, no child should own an image like that. And as we think about the children that are coming into our classrooms, you are such a lifeline to so many of them. And that doesn't mean that you have to stack on extra work or things like that, but just your simple connection and your support and your cheerfulness and your interest in their life can begin to turn this situation around. But what we've learned now in trauma-informed care is children that are growing up in some of these horrific situations, this is actually the brain development that comes in your room. So you're going to get out there and do the best you can and teaching and all, but teachers, they aren't going to learn the same unless we begin to put some things, strategies in our classroom to help children develop emotional regulation. And it's really created the perfect storm for the education system, because your promotions, your school funding, it's all around test scores. And so now we realize that the kids are not having the same ability to learn because of the way trauma has derailed brain development. All right, so here's a simple little activity from Dr. Dan Siegel, the Whole Brain Workbook. And I encourage teachers to teach children about how their brain works. So if you look at your hand, I got mine in front of my camera here, the upper 4 fingers, that's your cortex, okay? And your thumb, that's your amygdala. And while we're in this training today, this is the way your brain is looking. You've got like a little fist. Your amygdala is all tucked in. Your cortex is absorbing this. Maybe you're taking notes. Maybe you're eating a snack. Maybe even somebody out there is laughing at my jokes. I don't know. But anyway, but if a bear runs in the room while we're in this training, then literature calls this flipping your lid, flipping your lid. And so your cortex shuts down and your amygdala goes to work. But however, the amygdala can only do 3 things: fight, flight, or freeze. So teachers, when we see fight, flight, or freeze in our classrooms, or when we see hypervigilance, which is fight or flight, or hypovigilance, which is shutting down. A child looking at you and maybe responding, but really just nothing, no response, or isolating in the classroom, that kind of thing. Then we know that a child has kind of got an overdeveloped amygdala, okay? We're going to talk about some strategies here as we go on. So I want to, as we're getting close to the break, I want to give you an idea of how the brain works, okay? So I want you to think in real simple terms of moving up the brain like an elevator, okay? So when you see a child in survival state that's in that fight, flight, or freeze mode in your classroom, the very first message, teachers, you need to give to that child is that you are safe. Whatever way you communicate that to the child, that you are safe. So think of you are safe as loading the child on the elevator in their brain. And what your goal is to get the child to the upper part of the brain where now we're going to calm down, we're going to regulate, we're going to be able to think clearly and do some problem solving, okay? But the second floor on the brain is the emotional state. And the message that needs to come from the teacher here is, I am with you. And can you see how simplistic these messages are? But it's helping a child move from that panic, from that fear, from that hypervigilant, from that combative, up into the areas of their brain where they're going to begin to calm down and integrate into the classroom. And teachers, you may have to do this with some students over and over, but you know what? Teachers are telling me the more they begin to practice this, and that's why it's such a joy today to be sharing with a whole group of you. So maybe you can begin to implement this as a team and hold each other accountable. All right. And then when we get to the top floor of the brain, the executive functioning state, now we can begin to find a solution. All right. So let's think about moving through the layers of the brain like an elevator. All right. So when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm and not join their chaos. So trauma can impact school performance with lower grade point, higher absences, increased dropouts, more suspensions, and decreased reading ability. Trauma can impair single events, can cause children to be jumpy, lose sleep, have nightmares. Anger can interfere with their concentration and their memory. And chronic exposure of trauma can impact a child's memory and cognition, their ability to focus, interfere with effective problem solving or planning. When I train judges in a juvenile court setting, I talk about a girl named Carmen in a case study. It's a fictional character, but I talk about how Carmen has gone to the same school system her whole life. If you're Carmen's 6th grade teacher, her 5th grade teacher will tell you, oh, you're going to love Carmen. She's a good student. She's here. She does her work. However, now at about 16, Carmen's a junior, and the teachers notice that Carmen's not the Carmen they're used to. She's coming in a little bit late. She's very distracted. Her work is affected. Sometimes her work is not being turned in. And so the teacher refers Carmen to go to the counselor. And it's in the counselor's office that they realize, and they hear from Carmen, that Carmen's mom has a new boyfriend. And the boyfriend thinks Carmen is cute as well. And once in a while, the boyfriend comes to the school, checks Carmen out, takes her down the road, and violates her. The first time it happens, Carmen tells the mother about it. But the mother responds, honey, he's not going anywhere. He's paying our rent. And so now Carmen has absolutely no protection against this boyfriend coming to the school. And Carmen never knows what day it may happen. So can you see why instead of thinking Carmen's behavior is willful, Carmen's behavior is survival? And so that's why trainings like today is going to kind of give you all like a map reader as teachers to understand what some of these behaviors mean. So what could trauma look like? And this is kind of for my teacher training, I have healthcare and police and all, but really you may have a child that's always all alone. Well, maybe it's because bad things have happened to this child when they're around others. Or you have the little child just having a meltdown over the smallest little things. Well, this is a child that's living in that downstairs brain because it's been more highly developed over time because the child's been exposed to things that are danger. Or the little girl that's hypervigilant, just knows at any minute the bear will run in the room. Or the little child that's disconnected. So when you see disconnected in your classroom, rather than thinking maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's the fact that that child's not sure if mommy's going to be home. Or maybe last night daddy and mommy argued and daddy packed up his things and left. And so it's not about fractions. It's not about ABCs. It's about children navigating hard places away from school. And so this slide is a really good one I got in 2015 from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And it shows the behaviors of trauma, shows the behaviors of ADHD, but educators, look how much there overlaps. And I'll make these slides available to Jennifer and Michelle, the different ones that you can have after today's training. Okay, we're going to pause right here and we are going to take a 7-minute break. I'm going to set my little timer and we will come back and wrap it up. So let's take a break. 5 seconds. We'll come back together. About 30 seconds. All right, let's get back started. All right, so thanks for joining us again. All right, let's talk a little bit about some trauma-informed strategies while navigating COVID-19. And this is where I talked about at the beginning of our training that we want to just talk about you for a few minutes, about the physical and emotional well-being of the staff. So teachers and staff have been faced with professional stress, methods have changed, new learning skills, technology platforms, all while assuring there's internet access to, the children to be able to work from their home. But then there's even the personal stressors. Honestly, I started wondering last year when COVID really shut things down, now all of a sudden teachers not only had to teach virtually, but then you had your own children. And, honestly, my hat is off to you. My heart is out to you, and navigating, not only now having to do your job virtually and keep kids engaged, but now your own children having to learn that ways. Or maybe people were furloughed from jobs or having health concerns. So we want to talk about how to make sure that we're thinking about the health and well-being of the staff. This is a precious little video. I did a convocation for a school district in Marion, Virginia, Smith County, Virginia, back in August, 600 teachers. And I shared this video, and afterwards the superintendent, he just gave me a big hug. And, it kind of made me feel like what the teachers said in this phone call, it resonated with him and his team.
Honestly, the first thing I want to do is just burst into tears. My tank is empty, and I need to binge all the Girl Scout cookies and only wear sweatpants for at least 3 months straight. I've been a teacher for 27 years, and this is the first time I have just hated what I do. It has nothing to do with the kids. We were heroes 1 minute and then vilified. People wanted to blame us for having schools closed. I wanted to stand outside the school with a megaphone and just shout, I am just a lady. I have no idea what is going on, but I am here and I'm really trying my best.
There are things that I think we'll be able to take away from this, but for the most part, it's like,
I have taught hybrid, then remote, then back to in-person, then we got quarantined, and then I have to do state testing. Somebody somewhere is not listening to educators.
So I had my kids in the classroom, not really socially distanced. Then I had my kids on Zoom. Then I had kids I never was able to find. They were just missing. Like, to take attendance, I just gave up.
I care about my kids. I love them. But I feel like I'm choosing between my sanity and everything admin requires of me.
I think one of the hardest things, it's making the middle schoolers wear their masks so we can stay at school. It's like, would you just put the damn mask on and leave it on your face, please?
It's been a struggle, but I also have really valued this year as a time to question a lot of the things that we believe about public education.
This is our chance to really shake up education, to look at what really matters, to look at how do we spend our 53 minutes in class each day.
I teach high school ELL students to see them struggling at first, but overcoming all their challenges in a virtual environment.
I'm so grateful that I looked outside as a way to safely bring my students back to school. Some days, our read-alouds take place under a canopy of tall pine trees.
I can't do this without getting broken up.
This year has been the most challenging, but the most rewarding. And I'm so proud of all of us, teachers, administrators, students. We couldn't have done it without each other.
America's educators are stronger and braver than you think. If we can make it through this year, we can make it through anything.
You know, and here's a place that, again, I wished I could see all your faces and just from the bottom of my heart say thank you and echo, you know, what this phone call portrayed, that in your own way, in your own struggles in navigating, not only teaching, but navigating, wondering where kids are, you know, having concerns about your own family. But yet, what do educators do? They educate, they press on. I was honored to be asked by a university faculty to write a foreword in a book. And what the book was all about was they asked universities across the nation, faculty that wanted to submit an essay about what teaching during COVID was like. And, you know, I thought, what am I going to write as a foreword? And I said, you know what educators did during COVID-19? They do what they do best. They learned lessons and they taught lessons. And, you know, and so from my heart, I'm sending a thank you, you know, from Tennessee for you all pushing on, being the great educators that you are. And I think that little video there kind of highlights the sentiments from one end of the spectrum to the other. So let's talk about making self-care a priority. You know, sometimes we need to think about social supports, whether it's a virtual coffee break or a lunch hour. Actually, during COVID, a good friend of mine, a psychology professor at the university, she's been really instrumental in work that I've helped pioneer up in Northeast Tennessee and in rural Appalachia. And when we couldn't meet in person, we would have a call on the phone, but almost at least every other week we meet at a little taco place, and they have a great big patio, and we just sit out there and just share some lunch, and we actually even eat off the kid menu. We're cheap, but we just sit out there and just share about families and our things are going on in our jobs and projects. And you know, I come away with just sense of being charged up, and you need to be able to talk about life outside of school. And when I first what came away from the healthcare job in COVID-19 and was home now all the time, you know, it helped me to really create a routine. And I do little things like I love to go eat my lunch outside on the front porch. Except then my husband took the front porch off. Our home was needed a little bit of some upkeep, and particularly the front porch had some rotten places, and he just retired as a contractor. He's about got it put back together, but just something as simple as going out on the front porch for a few minutes to eat lunch. Or I love to ride my bike, and we have some great Rails to Trails program real close to where we live, and I get up early, and when it's daylight, get out there and ride a few miles before my day starts. So, you know, you may have something different, but the main thing is something, okay? And then incorporating physical movement. And I don't know who's here on the training today that may be administrators, but it may be more important than ever to just have a check-in with your staff, collectively and individually. So you need to, teachers, make it a priority to encourage one another through the day to manage the stress and take care of yourself and your family. So here's a great little graphic. Why don't you go in the chat, and if anybody wants to enter something, what do you do for self-care? Here's some great ideas. You know, getting sleep is important, enjoying the sunshine. If there's anybody in this that loves to tidy, as far as a way to be a stress buster, I wished you lived in Tennessee and I could get your number. I would really help you chill. I have some home projects here that I could really use some help on. So go in the chat. What are some of the things that you do that help you to unwind or reboot? Anybody? Cuddle cats. We had a self-care event here before COVID, and I went down to the Humane Society and got a couple little kittens and brought them in, and we just cuddled kittens. Okay, what do we got coming in the chat here? Oh, run, paint, do yoga, cook with my girls, watch my favorite shows. Yes, yes, yes. Walk in nature. Yep, yep, you got it. And go to the beach. Yeah, you can do that a lot better. Eat. Yes, relaxing techniques, walk in the sunshine. Very, very good. Very good. Yep. Play, sing music. Yes, yes. Run, bake, enjoy coffee quietly. Excellent, excellent. All right, great. It makes me happy to see you all have some things you're doing. Bike, craft, listen to music, clean, learned how to draw. A friend of mine, she started taking a painting class every Thursday, and man, she's quite the painter. So it's great that you get it. You're connecting the dots that taking care of you should not be the last thing that you do. Okay, good job. All right, so identifying and assessing traumatic stress. So children now with identified histories of trauma could really be especially vulnerable during COVID-19. And the stressors of this crisis could place all children at risk, but we need to be mindful of those kids that we know are already at risk. Matter of fact, over the weekend, a principal that's a good friend of mine that's done amazing things with trauma-informed care, she called me out of the blue, and I could tell she was a bit discouraged. And she said, Becky, I feel like I'm encouraging our teachers to just hold the line right now. And they've done an amazing job of implementing trauma-informed practices. But she said, we realize that some of our children that we knew were at risk are even now at greater risk. And so we want to think about these things in a pandemic setting. And educators, you have to think about this. You're one of the few adults outside of a household to actually see children during a crisis. And though teachers are not expected to be mental health professionals, we know now through trauma-informed practices that are resilient focused that school staff can use their relationships like Chad, like Josh, that can become a link to helping children to flourish, to overcome hard places. And then sometimes, certainly, if you realize a child is needing additional help dealing with serious depression or anxiety, then what is the referral process in our schools, okay? And then as you can, it's good to share healing strategies with the caregivers. Teach them the upstairs, downstairs brain, or things like greeting students by name, creating a touch-free virtual routine if that's where your learning center is at this moment. And invite connection. Engage children and families in creating rituals that replace the missing ones. You know, when our granddaughter last year turned 4, her birthday's in the spring, and everything was really locked up tightly. So my son and daughter-in-law said, you know, Mom, we're not going to Chuck E. Cheese or Just Jump, one of the usual places for birthdays. They said, what we're going to do is just ask everybody to come by, and if they want to leave a gift, but we're going to have a birthday parade. And so they live on a cul-de-sac, so we all got some streamers, and they don't live very far from where we are. So everybody drove by, and let us as grandparents stand out in the yard. And my little granddaughter looked like the Queen of England up there between my son and daughter-in-law, giving the little wave as all the aunts and uncles and other grandparents came by. And when my daughter-in-law told me that night, she said when she was putting her to bed, she said, you know, Paisley, what was your favorite thing about your birthday? And she said she pulled her head over to her ear and she whispered, she said, my parade, Mommy. And you know, we'd have never had a parade had it not been the kind of times we live in. So though our celebrating may look different, we can still find ways to celebrate. All right, we are going to wrap up in our last section here talking about, I think there's one more, but we're coming into the part I really love the most, where we talk about strategies, okay? So in this module, we're going to cover creating trauma-sensitive schools. What does a middle school, high school look like? I know that there are teachers here on this training that are all the way from kindergarten to high school. So we're really trying to make the material applicable to all. And then we're going to talk about how to create learning environments that heal and show how that all staff are the key to success. Okay, this little video is about 8 or 9 minutes long, and it's a great picture of how to take this from this one training on this Wednesday afternoon and begin to move your school to changed culture. It doesn't happen overnight, but this conversation with this school and this little video will show you some next steps you can take.
My name is Natalie Pohl, and I am the principal of the George School in Brockton, and I've been in Brockton for 22 years. I think one of the biggest successes that we've seen so far is with the size of our building. We have over 1,000 people under our roof, 925 children, 100 plus staff on any given day. So to really have a school-wide initiative that everyone is focused on, from the teachers, the secretary, the MTAs, the paraprofessionals, the cafeteria workers, our lunch ladies, and everyone is talking the same language, I think is really important. And again, it was an opportunity for us to really come together as a school to create and articulate the kind of school that we wanted to create for students.
It was clear that the staff was ready to move forward towards becoming a trauma-sensitive school. And teachers are ready to change their mindset about the way students behave, why they behave in those ways, and what we can do to help them improve their behavior as opposed to strictly punishing students for their behavior.
I had asked the staff members if there was anyone that would like to join me in creating a safe and supportive school team to please let me know. And I was really surprised by the number of staff that emailed back and said they wanted to be part of it.
And I realized that the way that we have been working with children since I started school had to change. When I first started teaching, everyone had to sit in rows. There were no small groups. And if you had a quiet classroom, you had a good classroom. There was no such thing as productive noise. Everything was discipline, discipline, discipline.
One thing that we've learned is that if a child isn't ready to learn, it doesn't matter what lesson you have or what materials you have or how fantastically you present it. If they're not ready, they're not ready. And so what we do is we work very hard to make sure our children come in every day and that they're greeted, they're welcomed, and they realize that school is a safe place for them.
So morning arrival was another one of those structural changes that we had made in our school about 3 years ago, and really wanted a safe way for our students to enter the building. But every morning a team goes outside and we're greeting the students and welcoming them to the school day. We started shaking hands or giving fist pumps and things like that. So the kids smile, they look forward to it. The parents are smiling, the kids are smiling, and it's just a nice way to start your day.
There's my Austin. Have a great day. Good morning.
All of our staff members are a really important part of the whole George School team. Our custodians are wonderful. Mr. Webster is out front every morning greeting students as they come in. Many parents have stopped and just have said, he is the best custodian ever, and they just really love his greeting and his smile every morning. Mr. Smith is another one of our custodians, and on any given day you can find him sitting with a table of students in the lunchroom and talking to them and finding out about their weekends or their days or what they like to do. It's just really nice to see them developing relationships with our students, and that's really important. It's all about developing relationships.
What's there? That's great.
There were two main areas that teachers felt or staff felt that we needed to work on: communication and connectedness, building that sense of community. And at first we really focused on the adults in the building and how the adults interacted with one another, connected with one another, communicated with one another. So our first professional development that we had with teachers was a building-wide opportunity for all staff to attend. Our custodians, our cafeteria ladies, everyone participated. And I can't tell you how many people at the end of that training came up to me and said, we needed this, and these are our students, and what can I do? What's our next step? So I feel like they were facing these challenges in their classrooms, and they were looking for it to be addressed and how we could work together to create some changes. So they were ready for it. So when we started talking about how we could connect our students to one another, lots of different ideas were brought to the table. But we wanted something that was easy to implement, wasn't a heavy lift for teachers. Teachers are very busy, they have a lot on their plates. We wanted to make it something that was natural. So we came up with the idea of Breakfast Buddies. The idea was to connect with a classroom that you don't normally get to talk to.
So we've been doing Breakfast Buddies in my classroom with a few different classes. We find that it's hard sometimes with all of the different programs that we have here at the George School for kids to not feel like they're kind of pigeonholed into which classroom they belong to.
And so after Breakfast Buddies is done and they come in, one of the things I'll do at morning meeting is say, oh, who made a new friend today? What are they going to do this weekend? So you kind of hold them accountable, but at the same time, you're giving them a chance to be social. And breakfast is a great time to do that.
Natalie really values everybody's input and feedback, and you really feel that you are affecting change in the school. This isn't just a one shot and done. This is something that's become part of the fabric of the school, part of the everyday working of the school, and it's something that's really important to me to continue.
Mrs. Pohl shares this with everybody, not just the teachers, custodial staff, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, teacher assistants, nursing staff. Everybody is involved. Anybody that works with children knows about our action plan and what we do here at the George School.
I'm Dr. Claudia Gallagher. I'm one of the adjustment counselors here at the George. One of the things we do is the tranquility room. We learn to really pay attention to what our five senses tell us. We teach the kids to be able to read themselves so that they know that they can choose to react to things in the way that is best for them. They don't have to feel that they are at the mercy of what happens outside of them.
It's been hard to describe what a trauma-sensitive school, what it is. And when people come to visit, I feel like they want to see one specific thing, but it's not one specific thing. It's many different parts all moving at the same time, and how everyone in the building comes together and how we work with each other and how we work with our children to create that welcoming, safe, and supportive environment.
I would say the culture of the school right now is, I guess, a culture of family. You know, I don't know any other way to describe it. I do refer to our students as friends because, I don't know, that's just kind of naturally what has happened. And so we all support each other. You know, the kids support each other, adults support each other, and we see kids supporting, you know, adults too.
In terms of teaching and learning, I think the tone that you're using, smiling, eye contact, your body language, allowing students to share, just giving them that minute to be heard.
Everyone's opinion is valued, and I think that's a huge benefit that we've had since we've gone to a safe and supportive school, is that it doesn't matter what your job is, your knowledge is valued, your knowledge of the children, your knowledge of the school, and you have something to bring to the table, so please bring it.
I think that's one of the biggest changes that I've seen in this building since we implemented our action plan. Just, you know, the staff that really has a raised awareness that these children are doing so much more, and that there's a recognition and, you know, a mind shift in that we're teaching not only academics, but we're teaching social and emotional learning as well.
I just love how this work tied so nicely to initiatives that are already happening within the building, what it's done for our climate and the culture within the school. It's, you know, who doesn't want to come to, you know, a happy place to work.
And you see from that video how that they're all involved. And the principal opened it up to anyone to be involved, and the teachers that participated in the implementation committee and then developed an action plan. You see the custodians are involved, and Smith County schools that I've been involved with for 2 years during COVID, I trained the bus drivers, cafeteria, custodians, and the school secretaries because they want everyone that comes on their campus to understand that the kids may be coming in and what those behaviors are representing are difficult places at home. All right, so let's take a look at this little chart. It's really a great little graphic to compare maybe behaviors of kids in a traditional view of education, and then what are we going to do now that we have on our trauma-informed lens, okay? So in a traditional view, we see that the thinking is that a child is choosing their behavior, and as a result, they need consequences. Now, let me just pause just for a minute there and just say that trauma-informed schools does not mean that kids are not held accountable, okay? Accountability is still high priority, but we are going to learn some new tools. Remember I said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you look at every problem as a nail. So we're going to find some new tools that we're going to use to help kids be held accountable. But we see that in a traditional view, we're thinking that the child is choosing willful behavior, therefore they need consequences. And then this begins to label a child's behavior negatively, that they're manipulative. And, you know, we know sometimes in that one teacher or staffer is talking to another, and then that kind of puts a negative label on the child, and it becomes an authoritarian environment. It minimizes the importance of coping strategies. It creates a system that makes a child work for support, and it really is a staff-centered environment. But when we put on our trauma-informed lens, we realize that a child wants to do well, but their behavior reflects the fact that they lack the skills to do well, or instead they've developed survival skills or survival behavior. And we see that in a trauma-informed view, that this characterizes a child's behavior has meaning, that willful or survival behavior is communication, and that now we respond by a child needs calming strategies, or we pull out some of our coping mechanisms that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So what happens there is it becomes a collaborative environment, and that behavior is communication and it serves a function, and that all children receive support regardless of their need. And so it really becomes a child-centered environment. Okay, now we're going to jump to high school and middle school, and I want you to hear about the students and how important to them it is for this shift in the education. And then I'm going to show you some photos of programs that I've actually worked with and the most inspiring things that they began to do when they got the trauma-informed lens.
So Salem Academy is a 6th through 12th grade charter school in Salem. We're in year 13. We started out with 88 students in 6th and 7th grade 13 years ago, and we are now at about 440 students, growing to 480. Our school is about 49% white and 51% students of color, about 40% free and reduced lunch. As the student body population grew, we had a limited capacity to really address, certain social emotional needs, behavioral needs.
It just became really clear that what we were missing was that emotional piece, and that was impacting social, and it was impacting behavior. It interfered with the students' ability to focus in class.
So I think staff were seeing challenging behaviors in their classrooms, and when they had their first presentation on the impact of trauma on learning, I think there was just a big aha moment for a lot of people, really recognizing what that looks like for students, how it can present as something different.
Once our staff had an understanding and a shared understanding of the impact of trauma on learning, our staff then said, okay, what can we do? We know there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. But what we did learn is that students do better if they're connected to a community. And they also do better when they have relationships with people in the building.
If I'm in a class and I know like me and the teacher don't really like connect, when they call me, I sort of get that like feeling, like if they're asking a question and they like call on me, like, oh Eddie, like answer this question, like I get that like that nervous feeling. But like if I'm with a teacher that's like that I have a good connection with, like I'll feel like free to answer, like with no hesitation or anything.
Being able to like talk to your teachers or having that trust factor with different teachers or different students is like, it's a good feeling, because when you don't have them on the outside, you know, okay, I can come to school and I can get these resources, or I can get the help, or I can talk to this teacher or this person, and it makes you feel good and know that you have support.
So one of our core values of the school is structure and consistency. And so what you see in the morning when we're greeting students, welcoming them into the school, you also see when teachers are greeting students at the door to the classroom and welcoming them in. It's part of really a check to just, you know, make sure that we're welcoming kids, but also for me or for the teacher to be able to notice kind of what's going on with kids.
I like how like some of the teachers will stand outside their doors, or administration will stand outside their doors and they'll greet you as like you walk through the hall, so it makes it feel like welcoming. And
I feel like being in a welcoming school, you kind of have the assumption that you're friends with everyone, so you're really comfortable with everyone, even if you don't talk to them a lot or you haven't talked to them at all or anything like that. You just kind of assume everyone's your friend and everyone's friendly, and it creates a really good like kind of cohesive environment.
So our ultimate aim is to improve the sense of community in the school, which in turn would improve and develop positive school culture. We've learned quite a lot about building safe and supportive classrooms and how to extend that to safe and supportive communities.
Things that we're doing this year, I would not have thought counted, if you will, when we first heard this idea of trauma-sensitive practices and making this a safe school. So the idea of coming up with school spirit and a mascot, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be the first thing that crossed our mind, but that's one of the things that's happening this year that I think is fitting and having an impact. I'm actually on a team this year that's working on voice, generating more opportunities for student voice.
We're basically like just a community of people, and like that's how we function. Like that's the dynamic around here. You know what I mean? Like there's no there's no discriminatory. Like it's just, you know, like we all get along. Basically, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter like what race you are. None of that matters. Extracurricular activities, for example, like that really helps you build like a closer bond like with the students in the school. Like I do cheerleading, so you know it's definitely like fun, like seeing some of the girls, you know, outside of practice and like, oh, we interact, like, hey girl, what's up?
And we wanted to reach all of our students and get all of our kids engaged in after-school activities so that we have an opportunity to help them build relationships with adults, but also to build relationships with one another so that they feel connected with peers, and we know that that can improve self-esteem and help them overcome some barriers that they're experiencing.
The steering committee identified our 3 priority areas as family engagement, building communities, and then also increasing staff capacity to address behavior in a trauma-sensitive way.
So how do you engage parents at a high school level when you are expecting students to be a lot more independent and take the responsibility?
We would start to get in touch with parents and tell them all these wonderful things that their kids were doing on a regular basis. And then when we had to engage them in cooperating with us to deal with any type of behavioral issue, you know, we'd already be partners.
Parents are so excited
Mm-hmm.
that they are always informed as to what is coming up, when is their math test, when is that assignment due, what's going on in that curriculum spotlight that they heard about last week. So it's really nice because when parents are engaged, students are engaged.
So there was a time where my dad was going through a sickness in middle school, and I had so many absences, and I just didn't want to come to school. And having that welcoming environment really made me just overall do better in what I wanted to do in school.
I think the relationship with our teachers are super important, and I have a relationship with a lot of my teachers this year. And I think it's super important because like it makes you want to go to that class, it makes you want to learn, and it like kind of helps you take in what you're hearing from them like a lot more because you like respect that person a lot more.
It was hard at first to get a buy-in, but then once people started realizing
what this means and that everyone does experience trauma, and you don't know what trauma students experience, and you don't know who had a traumatic experience.
One thing that I think really increased buy-in from the staff was when we talked about how, yes, you're doing this for maybe 2 very obvious students, but then there are maybe 10 students who are also experiencing trauma and you don't know about it.
The group that I was in we sort of loosely called it the restorative justice group. There's the sort of the traditional school model, you break a rule, you must be punished for the rule breaking. And restorative justice loosely looks at, it's not the rule that's broken, it's the relationship that's harmed.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we repair the relationship?
The work of the first year and kind of understanding the safe and supportive framework allowed for the engagement in restorative justice, allowed for the engagement in student voice, that kind of the whole mindset, or a lot of the mindset of faculty shifted to be more open to those types of ideas.
Some of our discipline code didn't support all students. And so, I'm thinking of an example that one of my students and I worked on together.
There's a lot of teachers in this school that I got into a bad altercation with, Miss O, for instance. Me and her we never really saw eye to eye until now, until not recently, but we got to an understanding, and me and that's my homegirl now.
Our African American students were upset that they couldn't wear headscarves in school.
Whereas I wear my scarf to school, and then my type of hair it's not immune to this weather. I shouldn't be having my hair like this sometimes, and I have to cover it.
When the girls and I started having real conversations about what it means for them to get ready in the morning and what it means to be able to wear a scarf on some days that they want to, I worked with them. We created a little committee, we looked at it, we took it to other administration, and they said, of course, this is what we do. This is why we listen to students.
I've never seen a school that actually took time into learning about their students. That was the first time I never, compared to my elementary schools, I never really had that same relationship with teachers.
I think working with students to hear their voice on something that's really important, such as this topic, and then seeing that change through with them has made a huge impact on our relationships with students, and they feel valued and they feel heard.
So at Salem Academy, we have this room called the Mindful Moments Room, where if you're just having an off day, or like me, I deal with anxiety, and if I feel that building up, I can just ask my teacher to excuse me, and I can go to that room, and there's games and coloring things, and it just helps you ease your mind and get back on track for the school day.
The body language of the teachers has changed over the last couple of years, and also the tone of voice used with students has changed. And that is so exciting to me as a counselor, because I know, from talking with kids over the years, that those are the things they respond to. I see teachers leaning over and bending down to talk to students, to get on their level. And I think those little changes that teachers may or may not realize that they're doing have really helped our kids to feel supported, to feel connected, to feel at ease when they're in this building.
I think the really nice thing about this work is that our entire staff now has an understanding of the impact of trauma. I don't see this work ending, because our teachers now, I feel like they're more invigorated than ever.
Everybody's happy for when somebody else gets a good grade or when somebody else gets into a great college, but it's really pushing yourself and being your best self in every subject.
And I feel like when you look forward to coming to school, that your energy rubs off on other people. And it just shows really how we are really one. We're a community. We're not just a school. We're a community of students who all care about each other and care about our learning.
Did you notice the theme from the teachers as well as the students there about connection and about community? So in doing these kinds of trainings, all over the place. This is the part I never could have imagined what people would do. So my wonderful journey with Smith County Schools in Marion, Virginia, as they begin to become trauma aware, trauma informed, trauma sensitive. The juniors and the seniors in the high school, some of the teachers begin talking about the high school kids about trauma, and the kids, the high school students, they got it, that why some of the kids in their classes were coming together, coming to school in dirty clothes, smelling bad, and where typically sometimes bullying would set in. These high school students began a program, asked the principal if they could buy a washer and a dryer, and they did, put it in a mop room. And these seniors in high school run a laundry program because they realized some of their classmates don't have anybody at home that's doing the laundry. And then they went out into the community to churches and civic groups, and they created a clothes room. So the kids that are coming in torn clothes and clothes not the right size, because they're not getting that support at home because of an addicted caregiver or a caregiver that's just not there that much. These seniors in high school took it upon themselves to start this program. And then they started another program called Suds for Buds. First time I saw this photo, it made me cry because these high school students realized that some kids, didn't have the toothbrush and the shampoo and, some of the simple things that we take for granted. So in the same theme as that video, when we become trauma informed and we give our educators a trauma informed lens, and then our students, they begin to do some amazing things. And then when I worked for the healthcare, Elizabethan High School, which one of my sons graduated from, we trained the pre-health juniors and seniors, and they started a program to help educate other students about ACEs and trauma. And they did this mask program where they would talk about ACEs and trauma, and they asked students to draw on a mask how they felt other people. They wanted them to see them, and then yet on the inside of the mask to put how they saw themselves. And then this part really got me when I first went on a tour and we were mapping out what we were going to do. The days I trained those juniors and seniors, I wasn't cool when I was 16. I'm definitely not cool in my 60s. And I really felt like what I was saying, like they were just counting the time until I was finished and I was going to leave. And at the very end, I said, is anything I've said the last 2 days, can you relate to that? Does that relate to Elizabethan High School? And it's like a dam broke. These seniors and juniors started talking about, yes, we know we got kids here. We and some of us have some hard places in life. So one of the things they did, they took me on a little tour, and they had gotten in their grant money to have a counselor 2 afternoons a week. And they showed me, they said, Miss Becky, the counselor is in a mop closet. And they said, on the worst day of your life, would you want to talk to somebody in a mop closet? So after learning about trauma-informed care, this junior and senior pre-health class, they put together a little budget, and they, how much a piece of furniture would be and paint colors. They took a trip to Lowe's and looked at paint colors and floor samples. And then they got permission on their Thanksgiving break that the principal would allow the custodian to let them in. And they painted this little room and they decorated it. And if you could have seen the other sides, it had some nice artwork and all. And what are they doing? They just are using this trauma-informed lens to create community and to create connection. And this didn't come from teachers. This didn't come from the school staff. This came from students themselves. And then we have Topper Academy, an alternative school that I've been involved with over 3 years. They went from about 140 students in this alternative school that typically would earn about 200 credits in a year, graduate about 10 students in the first year, taking on a trauma-informed lens. The picture here with the little hats, the Topper is their mascot, a Topper hat. I actually graduated from Science Hill, the main campus for this school. And so the guidance counselor, after trauma-informed training, she said, on this Yahoo bulletin board, if you earn a credit, I'm going to put your name, the subject, and the date. And her idea was to fill that bulletin board up because typically 140 kids would earn 200 credits in a year. And the first year they recovered 1,155 credits. And when I went over there and saw these little Topper hats all over the room, I mean, it was so moving. The second year they graduated 44 out of the 140. Now, not all the kids are seniors, but typically they had a graduation rate of about 8 to 10. So they had 44. And then the second year, they also had 1,044 credits earned. And then they got the superintendent of schools to agree that if the students were on track with their learning, that he would give them a 45-minute block on Friday, and they called it incentive. And they asked the students, what are the kind of things that you would like to do in school? And so they got a little drone photography project, and they bought some used gym equipment and created a little weight room. And so, these are the kind of things that I could never have imagined by my part, just coming in and help people understanding about creating healing and environments because of the universal prevalence of trauma among the students and the families that we serve. All right, let's talk for a few minutes about healing-centered environments. 4 different things that need to be, and some of the videos they discuss this, they need to have safe, hospitable, and welcoming. And in some of the videos you showed, they talked about a morning welcome. And I know with COVID, we have to mix things up a little bit and do it virtually, but some way that we're welcoming kids, letting kids know that we're glad they're there. We're building community. We're intentional about building community. We're finding a way to connect to every child. And then we're finding ways to teach and model emotional regulation. So here's some of the things that schools that I've worked with began to do. They create the little posters of the greeting choices when they're coming in. A couple of the schools, this came from Cloudland High School, that the principal, Mr. Church, well, he's gone on to be in the Carter County school administrative with the school board now. When he was a principal there, they talked about to the kids about the bullying and about how trauma is sometimes the underlying factor in kids coming to school in a bad way. And so if our school is going to be kind, how's it going to be kind? And they let the kids stand in the word kind there, because it's going to be kind because I'm a part of this school. And then some of the times that kids can feel vulnerable during the day, maybe riding the bus, the start of the day. When I was working for the police, the Johnson City school superintendent told me that every year, 400 to 500 kids in this school system are classified as homeless. Now, it doesn't mean they're sleeping under a bridge or in a car, but it means when they leave the classroom every day, the teacher has no permanent address for that child. So when you see that these kids are living in such instability, that's why these healing environments of being predictable and things being done in routine are very much healing environments for kids that experience trauma. Sometimes going into recess or lunch or transitioning, going down the hall, maybe having a point system where some kids seem to be excelling, but then the message to them is, once again, I'm a failure. And then at the end of the day, a very unusual thing happened with Topper Academy, because the kids, then the teachers began to become a tremendous support system for the students. When I trained the juvenile court judge and her team, she said, Becky, this has never happened. But she said kids that are on our caseload at the court that go to Topper, they don't want to go home in the summer, because now we know that school has become a place of support and a place of connection. And then this is something that a Vanderbilt hospital in my state did with the masks and all. The nurses in the children's hospital realized that, the kids are not seeing their face. And, I'm the kind of person with my mask on, I'm always pointing and saying, I'm smiling at you. It makes my husband nuts. But, I miss that, just that little encounter when you let someone in front of a line or, something like that. And so what these nurses thought of was just go out there and get some buttons and wear them on our uniform. And again, these aren't necessarily costly fixes. All right. Here's an assignment that I want to give you. When you're doing a staff meeting, I want to challenge you to bring something to the staff meeting, maybe a Post-it note or a picture, something that has the name of every student in a classroom that you serve. Maybe it's in a maybe it's a grade or whatever way you want to divide this up, but bring something that represents every student into the staff meeting and stick them all around the room. Post-it notes usually work the best, okay? And then ask the staff to walk around the room and place a sticker or a check mark beside on the post-it note of every child they feel they have some connection to. Maybe they see them in the Little League with their own children, or maybe they've run into them in Walmart or live in the same neighborhood, or maybe one day at school they shared a joke, but they feel they have a little bit of a connection. And you know what, teachers, at the end of this little, I just trained 125 after school teachers just about 2 weeks ago. And at the end, one of them raised their hand and they said, wow, that really got to us, because when kids come in the after school program, some are there a very short time, some are there the whole time. And they said, we are going to do this connection assignment because we realize there are some kids that we really don't have a concrete connection to. So when you finish this exercise, if you see that there are some post-it notes or tags that have no one connecting to, then be intentional and assign these students to a teacher to begin to be intentional with a greeting, with a wave, some sort check-in, some short type of check-in to build connection. Okay, I'm gonna share the slides with you, but I'm gonna skip this video kind of for time's sake. It's about 7-8 minutes, and it comes from a wonderful school here in my own state. Matthew Portell, he's the principal here at Fall Hamilton, and man, he's just become a rock star. I lead a global resiliency accelerator with a doctor in the UK, and we had Matthew present this summer to our global group, and he's doing some fabulous work. But this video pretty much mirrors the other two, but it just shows how that all school members, all school faculty, custodians, secretaries, all have a role in beginning to help transition into a trauma-informed understanding to create an environment of connection in the school, creates a better learning environment. All right, section 4, we're going to talk about some classroom strategies, some emotional regulation strategies, serve and return, healing gestures, and we're going to wrap it up by talking a little bit about a discipline, or what we call in the trauma-informed world, tornado behavior. All right, so predictable. We want to think about, to kids that are experiencing household dysfunction, how can we provide structure? Well, teachers, you generally wrote the book. You know, you have Mondays something, or Fridays, a certain little routine. But I just want you to know, to kids that come from traumatic backgrounds, this is very important. Following a daily schedule, providing information in digestible amounts, and then show appreciation for the child's efforts to complete the tasks and their regular attendance. We have to realize, when we put on our trauma-informed lens, that all children do not have the same support system at home. And then when we're doing things like social distancing and hand washing, let these become some of our new routines. And then watch the children's experience, approach them with curiosity, and then create some things that could be new rituals, things like asking kids what is hard, what is happy, or one thing that I don't like during this COVID time, one thing that I do like my little granddaughter with the parade. And then we want to be careful about transitioning to lunch or transitioning to another classroom, that when we have a transitioning signal, that it's not turning off the lights, because to many children that could be very triggering, because bad things happen in the dark. And here's another little intervention that I like, 4-to-1 interaction. And so I want to give you a challenge. Police Chief David Roddy, Chief of Police of Chattanooga, Tennessee, he began to take 4-to-1, and he took some of his officers and they went to do some programs with coaches. And some of the coaches started realizing how negative they were as coaches, and, you know, calling out the young men, come on, you can do better. What are you fumbling? You know, those kind of things. And he was telling me a while back that some of the coaches said, you know what, we're up to doing about 10 positive to 1 critical. And so the goal is here, for every one type of constructive or comment that has to be of a maybe seem of a negative nature, then let's balance it out by more that are positive. And this can be something as simple as friendly conversation, a nonverbal acknowledgement. A while back, I was doing a webinar, and somebody that I actually know used to live in my state, and they joined it, and I saw them there on the screen, and they gave me a little wink, and I knew what they were saying. They were just kind of reconnecting. Good to see you, you know? So sometimes some simple nonverbal things can count as our 4-to-1. Praise versus criticism. And it's not at the end of the day about counting the number of compliments, but it's about building relationships. And then it increases connectiveness. It'll improve positivity, help kids feel more engaged, increase motivation, and promote academic achievement and regulated behavior. So I want to talk for just a minute about how kids learn emotional regulation. And so I have a little timeline on this slide, and I want you to understand that you're going to have some kids in your classroom every year that are not going to be as advanced on this timeline as they need to be. And that's going to be due to the fact they don't have serve and return at home. They don't have that nurturing support at home. But the way that child development experts tell us that children develop regulation, emotional regulation, is that at the beginning years of their life, like a baby, is that it's all external regulation. You know, my boys are in their 30s, grown and married, and sometimes it's amazed to me how it all went so fast. You know, my husband and I'll sit around and say, we know we had kids. Look, there's their pictures, you know. It just goes so fast. But when they were little, you know, and they'd cry, our oldest one, he would get kind of a tummy ache. He had a hard time adjusting to formula, and so he'd get a tummy ache and cry. And I remember when he was real little, I'd go through this little list in my mind. I'd change his diaper. I'd try to burp him. I'd try to feed him. And then, you know what? Bing, 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 something calmed him down. I did the right thing, and it calmed him down. But it was so nice then when he began to be able to verbalize. And so we start out early in life where regulation for a child is all external. But then we move to a place of co-regulation, where now a little child can begin to ask for a drink, or when they fall down to, you know, they're crying and come to mommy or daddy or granny and ask for the comfort. And so we're also, kids are watching this regulation from their caregivers. And that's why one thing police know is that when children are growing up in homes where they're watching domestic violence, there's a high probability those children are going to be the perpetrators of domestic violence in a grown up in the next generation. And so co-regulation is now where we're regulating in a partnership with a child. But the end game, the goal is to self-regulation, where the caregivers are still in charge, but if the child is cold, or if they're uncomfortable, or they're hungry, or they're thirsty, now we can begin to express clearly what's the need, and then sometimes just go to the snack room or go to the kitchen or whatever the situation. So I want you to think about your students in light of this timeline, because some of them are not going to come in a self-regulation place because they've not had the external regulation of the caregivers, and they've not had the phase of the co-regulation. So with that being said, we need to find some tools for teaching regulation. And there are many, many out there, but you can look online, a YouTube video called Magic Mustache. And this is just such a simple thing you could do for elementary age kids, that if you take your finger, index finger, and bend it and put your knuckle on this little dip in your lip under your nose, I'm told that that is a pressure point. And if you'll just hold your knuckle there like a mustache, and you'll breathe in, hold it, breathe out, and do that 3 or 4 times, that is actually a regulating activity. And so you can say to the kids, all right, everybody, time for Magic Mustache. And what you're doing, you're keeping the kids from going into the downstairs of the brain into the upstairs part of the brain, or things as simple as wall push-ups or fingertip push-ups. In my healthcare training, I'm getting ready to train 800 people in a healthcare system in the state of Florida that run the call center, telehealth, telemedicine, and I encourage sometimes these tiny little breaks of simple things like closing your eyes and doing finger push-ups or wall push-ups. Or here on this slide, we have a picture of an engine plate, and you can go to department store and pick up, 300 plates for a couple of bucks, those real cheap ones, and then get one of those tacks in the middle with an arrow, and then just teach the kids to come in and with their name on it. And am I running red like an engine that I need to stop? Am I green? I'm good to go. Am I blue? If I had time, I'd tell you about visiting a juvenile court. Actually, it was a juvenile detention center in the state of Maryland, and the guards were the ones that implemented this process. And it became so helpful for the young people to identify how their emotions were and how they may start out the day in the red, but yet later in the day would move into the green. And then there's an activity called a zone chart that works very similar to the plate. And then things like deep breathing, a singing bowl, which is my husband said one day, what did we just get from Amazon from Tibet? And actually, the Tibetan monks use a little tiny metal bowl, and they hammer the bottom of it, and it's kind of got a rough feel to it. But you take a little pedestal, and if you tap on the side and begin to swirl around the bowl and close your eyes, it begins to sing like a chime. And many of the schools, several of the schools that I've worked with, they'll get them. And they say when the child comes in, a principal's office or some infraction has to be dealt with, they just pick up the little singing bowl and listen to that little chime, close their eyes. And what are they doing? They're moving the child out of dysregulation in the lower part of their brain up into the upper part. Or there's chimes or snow globes or little glitter jars. There's so many ways that we can help kids to regulate. And this is a poster that should be in every elementary classroom. Star breathing is so simple. Actually, you can go to Sesame Street and you can find some. I was speaking in a conference in 2017 in Philadelphia, and the vice president of Sesame Street was speaking there as well. And she was talking about how they realized that Sesame Street was behind the times, and that many of the kids that they were there to influence now are trauma survivors. And so if you could go to Trauma Informed Care Sesame Street, you'll find a plethora of resources, and you'll find the little red angry guy putting his hands on his tummy and doing deep breathing, and you'll find Cookie Monster learning emotional regulation, calming himself till it's time for cookies, and really some really good stuff. But star breathing is a simple way. Breathe in, hold it, breathe out. And while the kids just take a trip around the star, what have they done? They've regulated it. Okay. And then there's some resources online like this little book. This book's appropriate for anybody, is from preschool to maybe third or fourth grade. And if you go to the author's website, Pipolo Productions, it's just a simple little woodland story. The paperback's about $15, the hardback's in the $20 range. You can actually download a free copy, but I invested in having an actual copy. It's a lot more colorful. And it's a woodland story of some cute little animals, and they talk about when I was scared. And the first part of the book is that when they're scared, like the dog bites somebody, or one animal, the skunk, makes a stink and that. And so you can go to the author's website and download to infinity and beyond free coloring pages. And you help the kids to identify when I'm scared, do I do this? And you go through that part of the story, and we see some of the negative ways kids are reacting to things like being afraid. But as the story progresses, now we see some positive ways, some coping skills, things like exercise or having a grown-up that keeps me safe, talking to someone. So through these two coloring sheets, I just did a retreat for a foster care program back in November of last year. And because they only have these children while they're transitioning into foster care, a very short time, it's become a very popular program in Tennessee called Isaiah 117 House. And so I asked the director to buy one of these books for every kid that comes through their homes there, and that the teachers and the volunteers can begin to just help the kids understand that even though when they leave and they're put into foster care, what are some simple ways we can help teach kids emotional regulation? All right, now let's talk just a minute as we're wrapping this up about some ways when we see a child's behavior, how can we bring a responding behavior, okay? So when we see a child is regulating, and we define regulating by their behavior is restful, this is really the place that's optimal for teaching in a classroom. A child is restful, they're calm, they're engaged. So what do we want our response to this regulating behavior to be? Well, that's not a time we want to make sure we're not turning off lights or maybe loud noises, things that could be triggering to the student. All right, what about when they're in the revving behavior? Think about on a sunny day being at a red light and next to you is a Harley Davidson, and when that while they're waiting on that red light to turn green, and so a child in revving behavior is vigilant. Maybe something's triggered them. Maybe it's in the afternoon. It's going to be time to go home, and this child's concerned about what's home going to be like. Okay, the child's been triggered and trying to manage these big emotions. So what is your response? Your response should be some of the things that we just reviewed to help our child regulate their emotion, where it just really starts to become a seamless part of our classroom experience. And then when a child is re-experiencing, when you see them in the fight, flight, or freeze mode, and we see that maybe something has been said or something has come up that while the child may be physically in your classroom, now they're somewhere else. They're remembering a bad event, like Carmen in my story, something like that. So what should be your response? This is a time that you make sure your efforts don't re-traumatize a child, and that we think about what could be restorative ways to hold a child accountable instead of the punitive. And then we think about reconstituting or coming back around when a child's calming down, beginning to get their managing their emotions. This is a time to help the child continue to engage and manage emotions. So it's really just a cycle. But see, by being trauma informed, putting on the trauma informed lens, educators, you can see when a child's behavior is going through this different matrix, so to speak, then you can have matching behaviors that help them to return to the area that can help create a learning environment. And then sometimes some of the needs are just physical ones. Did you know by the time you actually feel thirsty, you've lost 10% of your ability to concentrate? So I know sometimes teachers think that if we give kids access to water, that then we're going to need to have the bathroom breaks, which certainly is true. But we need to think about weighing it out by children maintaining a better state of concentration. And this comes from child development courses on creating trauma-informed classrooms, of recommendations of allowing kids to be hydrated, and then things with blood sugar, snacks and meals every 2 hours, because when children are hungry, they can have increased possibility of behavioral issues, hyperactivity, aggression, and that hunger can actually create a lack of focus. And then we want to think about not taking away physical activity, that we find ways to give kids, whether it's wall push-ups or some things like that. You can download on your phone a little app called Go Noodle. It's free. And I promise you, I mean, I probably got 3 things from Go Noodle while I'm doing this training. They are going to send you more mindful movement things that you can do in a classroom that are not really going to cost anything, from child development experts that are all free. And you don't do them on a screen. You do them in a school setting, okay? And then also we want to think about sensory processing. Kids that are spinning or jumping, or that need that real good bear hug, or kids that are the loud kids, or the ones that are fidgeting or wiggling. We have to say, could this be a sensory need that's being unmet? And particularly with my high schools and middle schools, they love this: prepare for heat. So just think about a child's behavior. Are they hungry? Are they emotional? Are they angry? Or are they tired? And each one of those, there's a little action to take. And so here's a couple of photos of some of the groups that I've worked with. Calming rooms. This is from a big Boys and Girls Club locally. I'm on the board there. We've created a calming room, and it became so popular. Boys and Girls Clubs from across the state of Tennessee have come to visit our boys club, and now many of them have written small grants to create a calming room in their club. And in Smith County, my buddies up in Marion, they've got sensory hallways. So now when kids are going down the hall, just simple stickers on the hall is helping the children to maintain better behavior, because what are you doing? You're bringing them into the upstairs part of their brain while they're going down the stairs. I mean, down the hall, they're having to go in a pattern, footstep to footstep to footstep on these stickers. I saw one that had duck feet, and you had to follow the duck feet. Or they have little calming areas in the classroom. Here's from a friend of mine, a principal. She has a tiny little beach setting in her office, and she explains to kids, if I feel upset, I love to go to the beach to calm down. And so when a child's sent to the principal's office, she comes in and they have a big jar that had pickles in it, was cleaned out, has sand and shells, and she'll say to the child, have a seat at the beach. And then we're going to talk. What is she doing? She's regulating the students. And then here we see little tiny calming corners in the classroom. And then this school went out on the playground and developed a peace path in like hopscotch fashion, and a couple of jars of paint. They painted a little thing that when kids get into some kind of conflict, the teachers bring them over to the peace path. And if you'll notice in the second photograph, they face each other. And the first thing is to stop and think. The next one is take a deep breath. What are they doing? But they're regulating a child. And these are play-like activities. A third thing is they face each other and they do reflective listening. I feel like this when you're acting like that. And the other side is repeating it. And then the other student gets a turn of saying, but I feel like this when you act like that. And then we brainstorm, take turns. How could we do this differently next time? And if we agree, we shake hands and we go play. If not, we try again. I told my husband, as we're celebrating our 37th anniversary, I said, we are getting a peace path in our house. I said, we're going to 50 or beyond. But can you see how some of these simple, inexpensive interventions worked into your classroom, worked into your playground, are helping kids build the stability that they don't have in their home? All right. And then we see here serve and return. We talked about that earlier. There was a study done with caregivers and their kids, and all the caregivers were allowed to keep their phone, and they were asked, the caregivers, some little activity, they were teaching a child something new, and all the people that were leading the study knew that the parents were going to get a phone call, and the parents that didn't answer the phone actually were more successful in teaching their child this new learning activity than the ones who did enter and then that did answer their phone. And so we see sometimes that serve and return is really short, but it requires full attention. So another app, I think there's a small cost for this one, Baby Sparks, but it'll give you 8 to 10 age-appropriate ways to support critical areas of development with serve and return that don't involve screen time, okay? And this, you can begin to intentionally put these into your daily programming. And as I mentioned earlier, our libraries, several of our libraries in the area now do serve and return reading groups. And then we want to think again about our gestures, learn to celebrate. You know, I could tell you stories that I've heard from educators, you know, of kids like Chad who said, nobody came to my graduation except Coach Morrow. You know, folks, you know, that when my boys graduated, I'll never forget our youngest one. He played varsity sports, and really a great kid, but I know academically he was at times struggled. But when he went across the line to get his diploma, he looked in my direction, and I told my husband, I said, well, it's a good thing they called his name, but I said, I have a feeling there's something up. And sure enough, when he came back and we were getting our photos and hugging him, I said, well, did you get your diploma? And he said, well, no, Mom, I have to go go to the office, I have a lunch tab. I owe $48. So I knew that there was something on his face that wasn't right. But you know what? Kids don't have anybody cheering or throwing that graduation party. So teachers, as much as we can celebrate that our kids are showing up and participating, that's huge. Things in comforting too, whether it's practicing relaxation techniques when kids are not under stress, counting to 10, the magic mustache, some of these things, then it's going to help them learn how to calm themselves. And in my longer session of training, we talk about how that coping skills actually help kids feel more confident. And then listening. Listening shows we care. And it doesn't have to be, I have a training for doctors, and these doctors that I'm getting ready to train in Florida. Okay, so a study was done that doctors, they took recording devices around to doctors' offices, and they found that doctors cut patients off in about 15 seconds, and that doctors were not listening very much to patients. And then in the same study, it found that patients felt compassionately heard by their doctors if they only listened 29 seconds. So folks, listening is not going to wear you out and take all the time. Sometimes it's just a small amount. I love this quote. If you don't listen eagerly to little stuff when they're little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they're big, because you know what? To them, all of it was big all the time. And then collaborate, finding ways to collaborate with kids. It helps kids that don't have support at home to have a sense of purpose, that I'm the one that always does the red Legos, or I'm the one that's the line leader. My little grandson got to be line leader, and you thought he was voted in as president. He said, Nammy, I was a special person. I can't wait to talk to him maybe tonight, because the fire department was coming to his school, and he looked like, king riding into school this morning. Even fussed at his mommy for stopping at Dunkin' Donuts because he had to get to school to see the firemen. And then teachers, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but please never underestimate how inspiring you may be to a child. All right, let's wrap this up and get everybody on home by talking about discipline. We want to balance accountability with the understanding of trauma behavior. So we want discipline to teach and not to punish. And as you heard in the videos there, the discipline should happen through the context of relationship. Things like, I know you're working hard to finish your work. You've had all your spelling words in this week, but last night you didn't turn anything in. Are you doing okay? And teachers, again, it may be reflective that it's not willful behavior, but there's something survival. I'm helping several states to implement. That's why I was in Delaware. I've done this in Tennessee statewide, provided this training for teachers, providing a training I have for police officers, because as a state, we're implementing a program called Handle with Care, where the officers just notify a school with a child's name and 3 words, handle with care, if that child was involved in a justice setting, because some of that's going to come into the school and may show up as discipline. And no child ever became good by being told that they're bad. The fastest way to a child's heart is to listen for understanding. But teachers, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but sometimes we know it's the behavior that does the talking. And so just like in the Wizard of Oz with the tornado, when we see a child's behavior become the tornado, we want to make sure that we're not sucked into that tornado, that it's very important that when we see chaos, we share the calm. So when a child is having a tantrum, what typically in an untrauma-informed environment, people might say, you're so mean, you're demanding, you're impossible, don't be a brat, you're exhausting, you're bad, we can't handle you. But do you know what? To a child, what they might be saying when they have a tantrum? I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm lonely, I'm angry, I'm hungry. I'm new at figuring out my big feelings, and I don't understand you when I feel this way. And I need you to teach me how to respond to big feelings. And you know what? I feel safe with you. Teachers, some of the students that might be the most difficult around you, you know, with your trauma lens on, really they're paying you a compliment that they feel safe with you. Now, we don't want to allow the behavior to continue, but that is the behavior is communication. And so just realize tornadoes are distractions. We must stay focused. Your ability to stay in your upstairs brain, oops, typo there, ensures a stable, calm environment for you, other children watching, and the instigating child. So I would recommend that we find some quiet, calming areas in the classroom where kids can de-escalate. All right, so as we move forward on our journey to become trauma informed, I want you to know it's a destination. I mean, it's not a destination, it's a journey. I've been working with Smith County Schools, superintendent down. So, you know, I've had the buy-in from the very top for 2 years, but they're making tremendous strides with the laundry program, with the sensory hallways, with the calming corners. And even during COVID, I did their convocation here a few weeks ago, and Dr. Carter told me that he sent out an email and said, we're going to start our implementation committee again. And out of 700 teachers, 70 of them, 10% responded and said, sign me up, I want to help. So it's going to take some teamwork. So I'm going to leave you today by saying, where are we going to go from here? You know, it's got to be a commitment to change. I hope some of your school leadership, if they're not on this training, they're going to hear it. We want to think about how are we going to get this message to all of our staff? What about future staff that we hire? And that when we make mistakes along the way, we just keep moving on. And here's some of the resources that you may want to look in. Star Commonwealth, they have free classes. I take many of them, and those are things that I turn around and share with early educators. But there's some resources. There's a free educator toolkit you can download. There's my contact information. We're really about at time, but I'll quickly turn it over to Jennifer. And if there's one or two maybe important questions, we'll see what we can do, and we'll send you on your way. And with my heartfelt thank you for what you're doing, it's making such a huge difference in the lives of kids. So I'm giving you a standing ovation from Tennessee.
And we're giving it back to you, Becky. Thank you very much. You take a breath. You were like rapid fire speaking at the end. So I hope that you guys, even those of us who have been through trauma informed training and know this information, I hope you're walking away with a takeaway, because that always makes the time worthwhile. But I would just a reminder to remind yourself and the others you work with, their behavior is communication. She said it numerous times, and not to take things personally, because two escalated people cannot work together. So as adults, we have to be the de-escalated person. But gosh, there's so much great work in this arena that we can do. And Becky, your message is phenomenal. Someone did ask a question in the chat whether we'd get a copy of the PowerPoint. I know we're going to get a copy, a recording to share with our colleagues, but will we get a copy of the PowerPoint so we can borrow some of your nice slides and maybe start some star breathing? And great, good. All right, we'll go home and download some of those apps, you guys, and take care of yourselves. And thank you so much for spending time together. It was a fabulous presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thanks. Go enjoy dinner.
Oh yeah, bye-bye.